The Chief Justice of Sri Lanka has been sacked or is about to be impeached. There are journalists who have been bumped off. There is a certain authoritarian streak in the government. And you find that they are dividing the Tamils. They are not working with them to devolve power. I think that is an opportunity the Sri Lankan government is missing. So this resolution, they want to tighten things up and really make sure that the pressure can be applied. And I think government of India should go along with it as long as there are no economic sanctions, which even China and Russia are saying should not be there. If it is exotic, basically exhorting Sri Lanka to follow the path that they ought to follow, what is wrong in supporting the resolution?
Now it's the turn of our member of parliament from Sri Lanka to respond. Mr. Chari, may I please go to Professor Vijay Singha first? Also raising his hand is Dr. Naganathan. I'm coming to Seshadri Chari. Professor Vijay Singha, you heard that today.
Yeah.
Now, I find it very interesting. Two seasoned diplomats on two different points of view in India, but KC Singh says you are asking for trouble. And there is no reason to be backing you when your government is being absolutely obdurate and inflexible. Your response, Professor?
I think that's a very partisan point of view, although I have the greatest respect for Mr. Singh as a professional diplomat. I think we have to remember that we're talking about three separate issues. The first is the implementation of the LLRC recommendations, and I agree we need to move very quickly, but I would ask you, look at all other countries and see whether they also move so quickly, because remember that just like you, we also have domestic compulsions, and it's not easy to ignore them in a democratic country. I mean, I have every sympathy for Mr. Manmohan Singh. I think he made the wrong decision last year, but we should not certainly hold that against him because there was a lot of pressure on him. And people like Mr. Singh, who should have known better and distinguished between the different problems, I'm afraid jumped on the wrong bandwagon. However, I think the need to move on the LLRC is very important. I myself have been pushing on this, and I have pointed out that the mechanism the government used was inadequate. I'm glad to say that now we have a much better group working on the LLRC recommendation.
Tell me one piece of evidence.
The second point.
Tell me one piece of evidence. I have a counter for you, Professor. Tell me one piece of evidence till now. One piece of evidence of human rights violations. Anyone which your government has not rejected. Give me any one. One piece of evidence, a photograph, footage, facts.
I'm really sorry, but I think you should be very careful. Many politicians would reject many things, like your politicians do. Like Mr. Naganathan rejects any hint that the LT did wrong. These are not things that we talk about from politicians. I said wait till the LLRC came out. There were people who said the LLRC would do a complete whitewash. I didn't see any trace of apology from those people. When the LLRC produced what I think many of us agree was a very good report, they looked at the allegations that were made and said on certain things there was no prima facie evidence, but they made it very clear that there were certain things that should be investigated. Now, if you take the doctored evidence in some cases...
How do you know it's doctored? How do you know it's doctored?
Well, can I tell you this? The Channel 4, when they first showed one, I actually read the UN report. It said that, for instance, the film that was shown had actually been spliced together.
Really?
If you noticed it, there were sort of 17 bodies in the first clip, and then it went down to 4. And I was wondering what this was about. The UN experts
what about what Al Jazeera showed in November 2010?
Well,
what about what was relieved in October 2010? I'm not talking only about Channel 4. My principal question tonight, Professor.
You say things like
Professor, my principal question tonight is this.
Let me talk about Balasinkham's son's
However grotesque the facts.
I pointed out that if you looked at those photographs, purportedly of the Sri Lankan army, there's someone with rubber slippers in it. When I went to Australia last year, they very triumphantly gave me 3 sets of photographs. I think they thought I'd say they were all lies. I said the first lot are probably true. They seem to be Sri Lankan forces with a dead body, but there's no evidence of crime. The second was a horrifying picture of a boy hung by the neck, but that was just isolated. They were trying to bring the two together. The third was a man being tortured, which was really quite awful. And then I said, hang on, in the feet around him, there are many people in boots that could be army, but there's one set of rubber slippers. Australian television suppressed my interview.
Sir, there has been a point-by-point analysis of what the Challenge 4 documentary has put out forensically, but neither are you. No, one second. Neither are you one second. Neither are you, Professor, with the greatest of respect, a forensic expert, and neither am I. My point is,
I can tell you,
let's have an open mind.
The UN report, it was granted that the videos had been doctored, which Channel 4 had denied at first. They said these were unedited.
A question.
The UN experts said they were edited. All I'm saying is there may be good explanations for the editing, but why lie about it?
Sir, but to call everything, Sir, may I say this? Professor,
is very, very sad.
Professor, a response for you from Dr. Naganathan, founder of youth.org, who has been told clearly by Mr. Parthasarathi to stay out of Indian politics and who is being accused of fabricating lies by the Member of Parliament from Sri Lanka. I'm coming to Seshadri Chari after that.
I didn't say that. I think he's gullible, but please don't say I accuse him of being gullible. But I think people like Mr. Naganathan are sincere and their grief should be respected so long as they look at evidence.
Dr. Naganathan.
Arnab, you check it out. 2009 LTT's wipeout. And India had helped during that particular war to wipe out LTT. Well and fine. Now, 2009 to 2012, what about the militarization process happened in the Tamil occupied areas? What happened to the rehabilitation work? It took 3 years to rebuild. What are the promises? What are the promises offered to India? The devolution of powers.
Answer the question. Answer the question. No, answer the question on human rights. Seshadri Chari tells you, Mr. Parthasarathi tells you today. You also, not you, as in the people you are supporting, the Tamil Tigers, they have carried out the worst human rights violations. Seshadri Chari, you have forced civilians to dig trenches. 1 minute.
So that's why.
You have shot civilians point blank. You've carried out suicide attacks against civilians. You have killed our Prime Minister. You have fired artillery near civilian points. You have used hospitals as targets. Don't forget the past before you preach human rights, Dr. Naganathan. Seshadri Chari, please. Seshadri Chari has been wanting to say something.
Yeah, that's what.
Seshadri Chari has been wanting to say something.
We need an international war crime investigation.
Mr. Chari.
I don't know. I had the opportunity of visiting the Tamil areas soon after LTT was ended, and I had, by virtue of speaking the same language, I did not require any Sri Lankan or Colombo interpreter, and I found a very different picture in this whole area. The Tamil population in that area wants to come out of the entire LTT experiment, and they don't want to even talk about LTT. And all those who are talking about what the LLRC did, what has India done in the last 2 years or 3 years? From 2009 onwards, how many infrastructure projects have we built? We got more than 50,000.
Yeah.
We were supposed to build 50,000 houses. Not even 2 houses has been built there. How do we lay the entire blame on Colombo? In what respect? And moreover, when we talk in terms of strategic involvement, I don't think we are doing a right thing by pushing Sri Lanka further into the lap of China. And as far as army's excesses in their war against terrorism is concerned, it was a war. Remember, the army was fighting a fully equipped LTTE army. The LTTE army had the capacity to bombard the Colombo airport and destroy all the planes. Was the Sri Lankan army dealing with a small little group of human beings? They were dealing with a full-fledged army which had presence in more than 54 countries of the world. They were running a parallel government, and they wanted to bifurcate Sri Lanka into 2 parts, and if Sri Lanka had to be kept as one, the army had to fight another army called the LTTE. And therefore, all those who are talking about human rights should know that it was a war, and these civilian casualties were part of a war that was fought. Therefore,
I have another question.
You cannot compare the Sri Lankan army with a civilian group called LTT. LTT
I understand.
was not a civilian group
I
fighting
understand.
for democratic
I
rights of the
understand.
Tamils.
There is one issue we have not looked at.
Therefore,
Like a voice.
I don't accept KC Singh. I don't accept KC Singh's argument when it comes to army versus LTT. LTT was a full-fledged army. Therefore, let us not discuss those issues.
KC.
And as far as these issues are concerned, are we really going to put these issues in the back burner and go ahead and tell Sri Lanka, if you want to increase your leverages with Sri Lanka, is this the way? By voting against Sri Lanka, are you going to increase the leverages?
KC Singh, Seshadri Chari is telling you, I will rephrase it, don't make the LTT army look like a cottage industry in order to create sympathy for them. They were an army and the Sri Lankans were an army. The Sri Lankans have carried out human rights violations, so have the LTT. The LTT have doubled it by killing our Prime Minister. Your response to Seshadri Chari?
I respect Mr. Seshadri Chari's view generally, but he is very ideological on this.
Ideological.
No army of the world fighting any terrorist organization. They were fighting a terrorist organization. And the fight, what we are talking about, is not the fight over from 1983 to 2009. We are talking of the last few days when they were cornered within about 1 square kilometer. And it was a free fire zone. Can an army where a terrorist organization surrounds itself with civilians be treated as a free fire zone by another military? They could have starved them. They could have slowly depleted their strength. But you don't start firing into it and killing civilians.
Mr. Chari, yes.
And we were complicit in it. India was complicit. No. DMK was complicit. They kept quiet in 2009. Why did they not make noise then? They were quiet in 2010. They lose power in Tamil Nadu and suddenly they woke up to human rights. But we were all complicit.
No, we cannot decide. No, KC, let me tell you one thing. In retrospect, we cannot decide the strategy that the Sri Lankan army should have adopted. There have been times when LTT was given an
Chari, how can you have an army fire into civilians?
LTT has always used KC, LTT has
so we fire into them with cannons if they don't talk.
Stage a comeback. No, but it was LTT which was using civilians as human shield. What do you do?
Tomorrow this issue is being debated in Parliament. And one thing, I'm coming to you once again, Mr. Member of Parliament, Professor Vijay Singh, a very important dynamic participant, if I may say so, in tonight's debate. I want to go to Mr. Patsar. Eventually, it is political. My question to you, since you saw it up close, is this. Tell me, Mr. Patsati, what about the issue of Tamil separatism? Eventually, it's not just about the UN vote. We haven't even addressed that issue, have we?
Look, let me tell one thing to my Tamil friends from Sri Lanka. India will never back a Tamilism. Get that very, very clear. Secondly, I agree with KC that we should go along with the resolution primarily because President Jayawardene has not kept his word on devolution. President Rajapaksa has not kept his word on devolution given to us. He's made us, Mr. Rajapaksa, he's made us look silly. He's also not gone ahead with the LLRC agreement. Having said that, I want to say one thing. I am totally against all this human rights rubbish. Both sides were involved in a bloody conflict. And let me tell you, even when our army went into the Jaffna hospital, where the LTT was taking cover, there are a bunch of cowards. Some civilians were collateral damage. That's the reality of war. And when the LTT gets tanks and artillery and wants to fight a conventional battle and uses human shields, they're a disgrace. They went back on their word to us on the 13th Amendment. So all I'm saying is, get Sri Lanka to move ahead. Let's improve our rehabilitation process. And to my friends in Tamil Nadu, because I'm a Tamilian from Tamil Nadu and I have a right to speak to them, unlike a Tamil from Sri Lanka, I hope they would invest in the east and north for the welfare and well-being of the Tamils. If they set up 2 engineering colleges there, the Tamils are so proficient and efficient, they will get their own employment or go abroad. That is the solution India has to effect. and get them their autonomy under the 13th Amendment. But don't give us all this rubbish about the LTT being angels and the Sri Lankan army being devils.
The debate is opening up. The debate could have been political tonight. We chose not to make it political and purely political only because we wanted to look at these dimensions. We assure our friends, both in Sri Lanka and our friends tonight joining us from different parts of our country, that we will take this debate forward tomorrow when it's debated in Parliament. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for that debate. Thank you very much indeed.